This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day. Carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unified Purpose. This is the podcast where we share inspiring tales of compassion, of resilience, and community spirit. I'm your host, Daniela, and I'm Penji's partnership coordinator. And I'm very excited because today we have a very special guest, Sharon N. Covert from Alzheimer's Association. Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Daniela? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing super well. I'm so excited to have you on. I think illnesses like this, organizations that dedicate their world, like their mission to this, are super important, and they're so great to talk about. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much for being here, Sharon, and I hope that we have a great conversation.
I know we will.
Awesome. Then to kind of get the ball rolling and get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you guys do at the Alzheimer's Association and everything that we got to know?
Sure. Well, I am Sharon Covert. I live near Charleston, West Virginia. I'm a lifelong West Virginian. I've been about 30 years in public health, and I'm starting my 9th year with the Alzheimer's Association. And we are the largest funder of research for Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's and dementia in the world, outside the United States and Chinese governments. So that's pretty good company to be in as far as funding research. We provide care and support services that are free of charge to people. We have a 24/7 helpline. We do education and fund research, look for really at-risk populations to reach out to. And we're just trying to build a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. No pressure.
No pressure. That's easy to achieve mission. Why haven't you done it already? No, I'm kidding.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I think that it's really interesting. What actually inspired you to sort of join the Alzheimer's Association? Because you said you've been there for 9 years.
Right.
What made you sort of join this movement and then stay with it for so long?
Well, I have been around 30 years in public health, and I started out doing some self-insured health insurance plans that were really heavy on wellness, trying to prevent disease rather than let people get sick. I moved on and was head of the Wellness Council of West Virginia for 9 years, where we worked with corporations and government to, again, prevent disease. We were very active with clean indoor air and increasing tobacco taxes and trying to decrease smoking. And just provide clean air for everyone. And that's, I've got this disease in my family. My grandmother had it for 9 or 10 years in rural West Virginia. There wasn't a lot of help out there. We didn't even know the Alzheimer's Association was in the state. So we didn't know to reach out for help. And it just felt like everything that I'd done in my career kind of came full circle when this opportunity presented itself.
That's amazing. Which actually leads me to a question that I have, which is, throughout your journey, you mentioned that you have had people in your family who have suffered from these illnesses, but I'm curious if there was when you think back, were there any early interactions, whether it was like your experience within your own family or with some of the families that were affected by Alzheimer's or dementia, that kind of really deeply shaped that understanding of what the mission is and what it looks like? Or do you think it has just sort of been gradual over the years?
I think the thing that really struck me is when my grandmother started exhibiting symptoms. She had 4 children, and they were all present at one of the doctor visits to kind of say, hey, what's going on? Like we think this is Alzheimer's, or we don't know. And this was back in the 90s, and again, in a very rural part of West Virginia. And the doctor was using the best information he had, but maybe not the best bedside manner, because his reply was, Well, we'll know for sure when we do the autopsy. And my grandmother lived for another 9 or 10 years after that. So, but that, prior to PET scans, being able to identify plaque in the brain for Alzheimer's disease, and some of the testing that's more recent, we just had like a biomarker test that was approved by the FDA, which is just a blood draw. So you don't have to have a PET scan or a spinal tap to be diagnosed. But that was something that really struck me. And people in rural areas, people of color, people who are underserved populations are more at risk for this disease. They're more isolated, and they're less likely to get an early accurate diagnosis. So, but that thing about, we'll know when we do an autopsy was just, that's rough. That's a rough thing to hear.
It's a really, like, I think, insensitive thing to say.
Probably, and like I said, I think he was using maybe the best information he had, maybe not the best bedside manner, but it was it's a shocking statement to be said to some children. And given that she lived, and we were able to keep her in her home until she passed, and she passed of a stroke. She didn't die of this disease. A lot of people die with this disease, but not a lot of people die of this disease.
I think that's a huge misconception, that people think that when they get diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, that it means like a death sentence, when it really just means like life is going to change drastically for the people around them. Because the people with the disease are not necessarily noticing as much as like the people who are the caretakers. Which actually, you brought up a really interesting point, which was kind of like how there's unique challenges that people who struggle with these diseases face in rural landscapes. With you guys and like your organization and everything, what are some of the innovative approaches that you think are needed to reach these isolated communities where there is that disease and are struggling more?
We've worked in West Virginia to just shore up the infrastructure. So we've had 4 pieces of unanimous legislation passed in the last 4 sessions, and that's really unique to this state because, we always say that this is a bipartisan issue, that red and blue together make purple. So it's not a partisan issue, but we've worked to increase. For example, we have now in West Virginia required 2 hours of training on working with people with dementia for police in the state. We have every public health campaign the state does must include Alzheimer's or dementia information. So there's stuff available out on the website. Increased training by the state available to physicians, because the majority of people who end up diagnosing this disease are family practitioners, and they're not studying this. You know what I mean? This is not something they're specializing in. We're really underserved on neurologists. Even neurologists, specialize further. So even if you see a neurologist, they may specialize in tremors or in Parkinson's or in seizures and not necessarily know a lot about Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's the kind of thing. Other things that we've done is get a task force appointed by the state to redo the state plan. There'll be moving forward. This last session, we had added to the state roster a dementia services director who will be in charge of that plan and implementing it. So I think it's just being more aware, because what works in West Virginia may not work in New York, and what works in rural New York may not work in New York City, and vice versa. So I think you've really got to know your audience, and you've got to have some flexibility there for people. We have some good programs in this state. The FAIR and Lighthouse programs help with respite care and help with caregiver training and things. But, you have to have a certain number of hours. You have to have a certain income level. And, I'm somebody that I work, I have a house, I have a car, my father lives with me. If something were to happen that he would have to have 24/7 care, I'd have to quit my job, and it would change everything. So just to say, well, they seem like they can pay their bills and they're not poor, doesn't mean that they're equipped to handle this, because a lot of people save their whole life for retirement and to do things fun, but they don't save their whole life
for diseases.
To be a caregiver and to put your spouse in, a nursing home. So
yeah, It's interesting that you bring up the caregiver aspect. So I think I've spoken about this in other podcasts, but my grandfather, he was diagnosed with a terminal cancer very late in his life, right? Like I think this was kind of like he died at 89, and it was at this point it was like, he had lived a long life, and
Right.
it kind of just happens as you age that things like this happen. But as his cancer progressed, he's like progressively started to need more and more care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really opened up like my eyes to the work of what caregiving is. Because even though I wasn't necessarily the primary caregiver, I was seeing the people around me taking care of him, and it was a full-time job. It's like
It is.
there were so many requirements, and he had to have like very specific types of care up until the day that he died.
Yeah.
And then when they die, it's like, oh yeah, I get some respite, right? Because now you have to face the death. And so it made
Mm-hmm.
me really kind of appreciate that and really understand that caregiving is, like something that even if you seem like you have, I guess, financial stability, is not something that you can, unless you have prepared for it, is really hard to deal with, right?
You're right. And I'm sorry your family went through that. And I have another, concern that as people get older, sometimes the medical community and family members can be a little dismissive, well, they're older, so these things happen. But it's like if you were sharp as a tack when you were 2 years old, you should be sharp as a tack when you're 92 years old. Like dementia is not a part of normal aging, just like cancer doesn't have to be a part of normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, your body's going to slow down, it's going to break down some, but that doesn't mean that we just quit.
Yeah.
But you're right, because I think a lot of people do things while they are caregiving to just get to the next day, to just get to the next hour. You have to really be in the moment of what's going on. And we always tell people with dementia, meet them where they are. Don't waste your day arguing with somebody about whether it's 1929 or 2025. What does it matter in the big picture? Don't increase the stress level by arguing with the person that you're caring for. But we make these decisions almost a minute by minute. And then after it's over and it's done, I know my dad always said, like, everybody's around the week after somebody dies, but 2 weeks after somebody dies, you're by yourself. A month after somebody dies, there's this thought that, well, aren't they over that happened a month ago? And, and people don't try to be careless or callous, but just that day to day of going back into rooms where you always saw them sit, eating meals that they loved or that you always fixed for them. It takes forever. It takes a lifetime to recover from that.
Yeah, it does. I think like a lot of times also people tend to overlook the needs of the caregiver and themselves, because the ill person is so like front and center, right? Like they're at the forefront. Their health, their mental health too, is kind of like what you're prioritizing, especially if they're on a clock, right? If you know that this person has very little time left, you kind of put that person in front. And then you forget that the caregiver, or you as a caregiver, are also a human that has needs and is taking a toll, both physically and psychologically, which actually makes me wonder, because like I'm assuming that with all the work that you do, you probably can tell. What do you think is the most overlooked need that caregivers, have that people just don't notice or that they don't work with, and how can we as a community better support them?
I think it's the ability to take care of themselves, go get their hair cut, go to church, fixing a meal while you may need to be paying attention to the person that you're caregiving for is a challenge. If you take people meals, if you offer to pick up their groceries, even if they order it, if you could pick it up, if you could help them get their loved one ready for a doctor's appointment or help them transfer to someone to a doctor's appointment. There's just so much. It could be helping them, like if you know how to cut hair, cutting somebody's hair for them, cutting their loved one's hair, doing some laundry or paying to have the laundry done. I mean, there's so many things. It does take a village. And sometimes it's just not available to people, even though they may be rural or they don't want to ask for help or they hate to accept help. But I know just with my dad, he's 90, and when I'm going to be gone for business or something, I just started asking my neighbors, would you bring him dinner on Tuesday? Because one of my coworkers encouraged me to do it. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just DoorDash something. But they were thrilled to do it. They were happy I asked. They talked to my dad when they delivered the meal, and he was happy to have the interaction because all he ever sees is me, So I think it's just stuff like that, In my church, I help support a foster family, and all I do is order them dinner once a month. But like, they're so grateful for that. And I don't think that much about it. I pray for them, and from that aspect, but it really takes me a minute to order that meal and have it sent to their house. But they have 7 kids in that house, and to not have to make dinner, one night a week, they've got to be looking forward to Thursday nights, So I don't think you can really underestimate even the smallest gesture. Sweep somebody's porch, trim their grass, weed eat, put their mail up on the porch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of people literally to leave the house and walk out to the mailbox or the paper box and then come back, something terrible can happen in that amount of time. So
yeah, no, I totally get that. I feel like the smallest gesture is going to alleviate pressure from people. Kind of like going back to like the example that I gave of my grandfather. Obviously, he didn't have dementia, but I think it was really interesting that my grandmother was kind of committed to being the primary caregiver until he passed. And my grandmother was the same age as him. And my mom was always concerned, she was like, you're an old lady too. You can't be the primary caregiver of an old man. And it sounded really rude, but my grandmother was like, no, because this is my husband. And I gave my life for him. And this is like the last thing that I can do for him. And as soon as my grandfather died, my grandmother sort of, I don't want to say decayed, but I think it was a very obvious sort of decline in her health immediately after he passed, because I think she had devoted herself so much to this other person that the second that she stopped being devoted to him, all of her health and all of the stuff that she was also aging and getting older and right, was more put up in the forefront. And I think it just made me realize caregiving is so much work that the person sort of puts even the smallest need that they have in the back. And I think had she been given a little bit more of breathing time during the caregiving, maybe she would be a lot less, I would say, sick now. She's not sick, but she's obviously taking a toll on her. I also understand the psychological aspect of her wanting to be there for him. I think there's a cultural thing where Latino and this big thing in the Latino culture is kind of just sticking with family and stuff.
Right.
So
it's admirable. It's a very admirable thing about the culture. I'm telling you, it's. But you're, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
But it's not unusual for the caregiver to not outlive the person, to die first because they haven't taken care of themselves.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what hurts them or what bothers them, because, well, what does that compare to, my husband's cancer or my husband's dementia? I'm not going to talk about my problems. I don't have any problems. And then after the caregiver job is over, there's the recovery. And it's not like, oh, well, now, and people, I don't think they mean to be insensitive, but think oh, well, now you could go on a cruise or you could do this. And they may not be in a mental space to do that.
Want to do that.
Yeah. So it's an interesting phenomenon. We had one lady who tried to be the primary caregiver for her husband and then finally had to put him in a care facility. But he didn't like the food, and so she would still get up and make food for him every day and take it. They were from the Caribbean, and he liked a certain kind of food, and so she would bring it and feed him so that she could be near him, But she wanted that identity too, and it was healing for her to be able to do that.
Also, like, I guess more sustainable because she was only focusing on like the meal aspect instead
Right.
of like the whole thing, right? Which I think is what can sometimes be overwhelming.
Right. And if your grandmother was 89, like what if you can't lift she may not have been able to lift an 89-year-old man, or you know what I mean? Or,
Yeah, no.
but a lot of times caregivers are hard on themselves. You lose patience and you may snap at somebody, and that's okay. It's not okay to be mean to somebody all the time,
Yeah, but
but
it's
but it's
yeah.
okay. But then you just feel so terrible. Oh, I should be better. I should do better. I should do more. I shouldn't be mad about having to caregive, and it's okay to be mad about it. Nobody, like I said, nobody prepares their whole marriage and is married for 60 years to think, oh, I'm going to get to pick my wife up off the floor every morning.
Yeah. I think like also the a really overlooked aspect with caregiving is just like how you don't necessarily like the person that you're taking care of. I feel like whenever we see movies of people with Alzheimer's or stuff like this, they're always like very sweet people, right? Like this sweet old lady with dementia that just says some wacky things, but she's like the easiest person to take care of because she's lovable. And like I feel like that's not like, at least in my experience, what it's actually like. When I remember like my grandfather, he would be very angry very easily, right? Like he
Yeah.
became a very snappy person because his cancer was, making him so uncomfortable that he would just snap, and he would snap at the people that were around him all of the time, which was my
Mhm.
grandmother and my mother and like my aunt, which is like his immediate family. And it made him, I think, not so pleasant to be around all the time, right?
Right.
And I think it takes a huge toll on the caregiver because I think like also when you're looking at an illness like Alzheimer's or dementia, you're talking about someone whose like entire personality has been warped. They're not just irritable, right? It's like, it probably isn't always going to be just like, oh, you're so cute and you said something quirky. It's, sometimes it's like they're being really difficult to deal with.
Right. And some people become nicer, and some people become terrible. Some people don't change a whole lot. Their personality doesn't change that much. But I think when you're in pain, when you're confused, people do get angry. Like if you're lost, you're in your car and the GPS isn't working and you're lost, and Lord knows there aren't maps around anywhere, but you get frustrated, and that
Yeah.
frustration can manifest as anger, and it's okay. It's okay, but that's a constant thing for a caregiver. There is constant frustration, especially someone who is terminal, because you're not going to have the doctor walk in and say, okay, your life's going back to normal now, because
Yeah.
even if you're no longer a caregiver, your life's not normal because that person's not there anymore. So there's just a lot of aspects to it. I remember a chiropractor telling me one time, he was looking at my back and he was looking at an x-ray, and he was like, you know when your back hurts, you're not in your best mood. When you're in pain, you're not in your best mood. So terminal patients are not necessarily always happy, and people who if I'm sitting here and I'm sure that FDR is the president and you keep telling me that it's Donald Trump, I'm like, why does Daniela keep telling me this? She's so ridiculous and she's really starting to make me mad. And because I'm just thinking how ridiculous you're being. But so that's one thing we really try to tell people is don't argue. There's no point in arguing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I totally get that. And actually I wanted to ask you, moving into like something a little bit more hopeful, which is I think there's so much research going into Alzheimer's and dementia. I think it's some of the illnesses that are getting more research in.
Yes.
Do you feel like there is any hope to sort of finding a cure or a potential, like more advanced form of treatment? Do you think from like maybe the next 10 to 20 years there's going to be any significant change? Obviously, it's hard to predict, but like just from like you being in space and seeing all of this, do you think there's anything like exciting coming up with any of this?
It has been crazy. I've been here for 8 years, and when I started, there was no treatment, no cure, no biomarker. You had to have a PET scan, you had to have a spinal tap. That was only to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Other dementias, some of them were like a diagnosis of elimination. And now, fast forward 8 years later, we've had approved FDA treatments for early stage Alzheimer's disease for several years. Um, They are infusions. They are for early stage and Alzheimer's only. But those are the first drugs to have hit the market in like 20 years to treat this disease. And then we just had a biomarker blood draw approved for diagnosing. And now that is not one of those send your DNA off and they tell you you've got this or that. Because honestly, I don't like those. They usually look at a series of things about your profile and say you're likely, to have this or this, which is, chronic disease. All of them have the same roots: physical inactivity, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, tobacco use, depression, isolation, family history. Like those are common for all chronic illness. So why wouldn't they be factors for Alzheimer's too, or dementia? And it's so exciting what has happened just since I've started working for the association, that I can't wait to see the next 8 years. I think we are legitimately on the path to some very real and effective treatments for even people that aren't in early stage, that don't have Alzheimer's. I'm sorry, you're listening to some workers in my house if you hear that noise.
Don't worry. I actually don't hear them.
Yeah, good. But I feel like that's from being static for 20 years, and in the 8 years I've been here, all this stuff has happened. It's crazy. I know at WVU, West Virginia University, there was one of their research students who had found that there was an eye test, just an eye exam that they did, that correlated with people, with certain types of dementia. And that's just fantastic, is to have that kind of thing happening. So we had, we've asked for more money from NIH for funding for research, and it's been granted. When I started, I think we were at $1.4 billion, and it's now almost $4 billion in research. So that's incredible. We've been successful in getting some of the stuff done at WVU, recognized and funded by the association. So we've put about $400,000 in some of the things they've done. And I always tell people that's not because we raised the money in West Virginia that we gave it to them. They had to apply for it, and they had to be some of the best applications in the world to receive it, and they were. So that was amazing. But yeah, I think people are getting into this field because the research funding has gone up and has been sustained, and that will bring people to work. We want the best and the brightest.
That's like, I think it's a dream, at least to just kind of like help people who will, right now, people who will have dementia or Alzheimer's in the future are young, right?
Yeah.
So to prevent that, for those people to not suffer with this illness, I think it's probably the diseases that are more heartbreaking to see.
We lost a mother of 3 in her late 30s 2 summers ago in Charleston, West Virginia. People don't talk about that. A lot of our statistics represent people 65 and older, and people think, oh, I don't have to worry about that till I get older. But the truth is, this plaque starts forming in your body years before you ever exhibit symptoms. And some people have the plaque and never exhibit symptoms, and we don't know why. And that's why the research is important. But it's also like every decision you make throughout your life, you're just a sum of that total, So did you take the stairs? Did you take the elevator? Did you eat the apple? Did you eat the donut? Were you 20 pounds overweight? Were you 20 pounds underweight? Were you exercising? It does matter. It all does matter. So when I used to speak about like diabetes and things, if you've ever had a car that got bad gas, like maybe there was water in the gas or somebody put sugar in the gas tank, the car won't run. It'll just stop because the gas makes everything go.
Yeah.
So like if you have too much blood sugar or not enough blood sugar in your blood, that touches everything in your body, and the body won't go if you don't take care of it. So it's been exciting, and I think there's more excitement to come. I think there is a reason for hope. I know I'm more hopeful because it felt like if you ever took American literature, there's an old sermon that sometimes they cover. It's called "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," and it's just like, stuff just happens, and we're just reacting to. And it's like that's not the case at all. Like we really do have control over our own destiny, and most of the time, if you take good care of yourself, you have good health.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously things that are like curveballs, but you can sort of catch it and try to make it better. And I think that's like a really hopeful note to end the podcast on, which is like be healthy. And,
if it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain. So take care of your heart, take care of your brain, take care of your body, and God bless. I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. So I hope people are. I hope they call us. I hope they reach out, because if you're not hopeful, if you feel like you're not, then you need to call us. You need to call our helpline. You need to, alz.org. Go to alz.org, and everything's there, and we are happy to help.
That's awesome. I was actually going to tell you to shout out where people can find you. So you just did it. But is there anywhere else that you want to direct them to in case they would want to like donate, work with you, whatever it is?
800-272-3900, 24/7 helpline. There is TTY access for people with who are deaf and hearing disabilities. And I used to work with the deaf. Many different languages. So if people, don't have English as a first language, we do have other people who speak other languages. Our materials are available in other languages. I think it's I was very impressed with the multitude of resources for different populations, especially being someone from a rural community. But no, I just come see the Alzheimer's organization, and we'll help you out.
Awesome. Yeah, I will be adding those links to the description of the video.
Thank you very much. This was so fun. Thank you. You're delightful. I appreciate it.
You're delightful too. I had so much fun having you on the podcast today, Sharon.
I'm starting to hear that now. I can. Sorry, the noise is coming.
No, but you were delightful as well, and I'm very happy to have you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
You've been listening to Unified Purpose, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.